How's it going, everyone? K-Steel here with another episode of Beta Quest. The Legend of Zelda is a franchise that has seemingly done the impossible time and time again, where each game is like a critical masterpiece that millions of people, critics, and gamers alike will adore for generations to come. With some obvious exceptions, of course.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
And this game, don't worry, I still love you. Not only that, but Zelda is a franchise where the development of every single game has fascinated gamers and gaming historians alike, with prototypes and beta builds being highly sought after and analyzed if they are acquired. However, amongst all this was the discovery of a possible prototype for a third Zelda game on NES. But this was a strange one, as everything about the possible prototype and the person who owned it was highly questionable. Was this even a real prototype? What is really going on here? Well, that is what we will find out. So, today on Beta Quest, it is time to talk about the controversy surrounding the infamous Zelda III, the Triforce Saga. According to joystick.com, on October 15th, 2005, an unnamed seller on eBay put up a mysterious-looking NES cartridge for auction at a starting bid of $20, with the cartridge being a normal-looking NES cartridge with a paper label on it that had the text, The Legend of Zelda III, The Triforce Saga. From the get-go, there was suspicion as to whether or not this was a real prototype or just some hack or different game meant to scam people. Not helped by the fact that the eBay seller was like, I have no time to play around these things. I'm a really busy guy. Alright, couple of things. You seem to be completely indifferent and apathetic towards having an NES prototype for A Link to the Past, or maybe a different Zelda 3 that got cancelled before being publicly acknowledged or announced. I find this to be a little weird. Even the most apathetic of collectors would at least acknowledge that someone may want this prototype. Not to mention, it was also reported that you, the seller, did not have an NES to even play the game on, so why on earth did you even bother getting this thing if you had no way of even playing it or testing it? At the very best, I could be thinking that you got scammed into buying a fake cartridge and are selling me a scam cartridge. Well, anyway, knowing that this looked a little weird, the seller went back and managed to get an NES to test the cartridge out, managing to take this pretty unconvincing and blurry photo of the game's title screen. Yeah, ghost photos are more convincing than that. The seller also reported that the prototype was pretty buggy and was around 50 to 60% complete, but did promise to upload some photos of the prototype on his website, which I could not find, probably because it never happened. Because it was fake. Where was I? Oh, right. Regardless of what happened, this cartridge was ultimately sold to a Canadian gaming enthusiast named Knight7 for a total price of around $3,000, which is quite a bit of money for a cartridge you don't know is real or fake. But, whatever. Sometime afterward, the seller reported to joystick.com that Knight7 may have connections to the game development company Silicon Knights, famous for some Metal Gear projects and Too Human. I need to play those at some point. However, this was very much an assumption made based on that name, as sometime afterwards, the company contacted joystick.com and stated that no such purchase was made by anyone in the company. How do you make that type of assumption? I mean, yeah, the name might sound like it, but whatever. So this is pretty much the part where the whole thing just disintegrates. In a heated fashion, I should add. At this point, a good amount of people correctly agreed that the whole thing was fake and were ready to move on, but a good deal of individuals still believed that the NES cartridge was real. This pretty much sparked heated debates as to whether or not this was a real thing, which often includes statements like, "You frickin' fricks, this Zelda cartridge was real," and "Gosh darn it, no, the darn thing was fake," and "I'm tired of all you Zelda fan fricks." Okay, they didn't sound like Sammy Classic Sonic fan, but rather, they most likely sound like overly upset individuals ready to eat each other in a cage or something. But really, let's think about this logically. There's this person who claims to have a prototype for either one of the most iconic games in the franchise, or a prototype for a game that never came out, and yet not only lacked an NES, but also act like it was just worthless gum he was giving to his nephew that he didn't like. Not only that, but when he did manage to get an NES, he uploads this blurry screenshot that looks less convincing than a ghost photo. This person then sells the cartridge for an absurd amount of money despite providing no real proof of its authenticity, and claims that the buyer has connection to Silicon Knights, who then shot that theory down. So far, things are looking really bad, and to make matters worse, beta NES cartridges are unlikely to work on standard NES systems unless one uses something like a Game Genie, and one can obviously see that the screenshot showed this prototype working on a standard NES. Ultimately, that was the final straw in this whole nonsense. The eBay auction was nonsense, the cartridge was nonsense, the whole thing was nonsense. And despite all the heated controversy about this cartridge, discussion on Zelda 3 ultimately withered away into nothing, becoming a distant memory in the Zelda fandom. But alright, what's the truth behind all this nuclear crackers? Was the third Zelda ever considered for NES, or was it always an SNES game? Well, from what I can gather, a third Zelda game was in development during the reign of the NES, beginning in 1988, but once the SNES was greenlit in 1990, the NES project was seemingly abandoned and work was started on a new SNES Zelda, which became Triforce of the Gods, or A Link to the Past in Western territories. Despite this, it is said that some concepts and ideas from the NES game were moved to the SNES game, so in some ways we did get that very NES project in the SNES game. And even then, A Link to the Past / Triforce of the Gods is still the third Zelda game, which was inevitable anyway. However, it should be mentioned that A Link to the Past's development is very strange and unusual on its own right, so much so that it will get a Beta Quest episode sometime in the future. But that was the infamous controversy around Zelda 3, the Triforce Saga. It is upsetting that the cartridge and the whole thing turned out to be a gigantic hoax or scam that turned up nothing, especially since it could have been possible that we could have gotten an NES prototype for A Link to the Past or Triforce of the Gods, or a different Zelda 3 altogether. However, what I find interesting is that we never really got to know what was actually in the cartridge. What was in that cartridge? Was it a hacked game? A bootleg game? A different game altogether with a fake label? If the screenshot wasn't a trick to have a computer image on the screen while the NES wasn't connected to the TV, what was this supposed prototype like? I guess we'll never know. Oh well. Regardless, this has been K Steel with Beta Quest signing out. I'll see you all later. This was a Kobalt Steel video by MS Bernie. Like, comment, and subscribe if you liked what you saw. Until next time, see you all later.